The man was shocked to find strange memories constantly appearing in his mind, and the most unbelievable was the power called magic, especially when, in a desperate situation, he actually managed to use magic. In this world, humans often faced attacks from pig-headed men, ape men, and other demi-humans, and ordinary soldiers were just cannon fodder against them. Luckily, his village had a master whose face would be covered with divine patterns whenever he used his strength, because he was a blessed one, protected by the land god. To him, fighting ordinary demi-humans was as easy as chopping vegetables, and even the blessed ones among the ape men were no match for a single blow. Inside the ape men was something called a divine stone, and drinking the liquid inside could quickly make someone stronger. But ordinary soldiers could only have a single drop, and the rest of the spoils always went to the blessed ones, since only by making the strongest even stronger could the peace of this land be kept. Yet, while the rulers feasted on meat and fish every day, those below could barely fill their stomachs. The man knew if he wanted to stand out, he had to become stronger, but with an empty belly, he could barely move. At this moment, he desperately craved braised chicken, confusing his companions, since he himself didn't know what braised chicken was, only that it seemed delicious, a memory from somewhere he'd never been. At the same time, the Lord's daughter was forbidden by her family to drink the stone liquid just because she was a woman, which frustrated her, wishing she hadn't been born a girl. Later, just as the man was knocked down, he saw another impossible world in his mind, and he wondered where all these memories came from, since he couldn't tell anyone about them, only hoping that if he really could use magic, maybe he'd surprise everyone in the next battle. Then the Lord got word that a huge number of demi-humans had gathered in the western forest, and since they were supposed to form an alliance with the western village in a few days, they had to set off soon. The Lord was worried the soldiers had no time to rest between battles, but Ohol, the protector, coldly insisted that shedding blood to defend their land was a soldier's duty. Later, the man wondered if people's hands could really make fire, and to his surprise, a companion had heard of a monk who once started a fire with his bare hands in the darkness, which gave the man a boost of confidence. Those strange memories in his head told him that to use magic you needed something called mana, but here, the power was called spirit force. The same thing increased by drinking the divine stone. Still, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get anything to work. Days later, during the alliance, soldiers really did spot demi-humans wandering in the woods, and during the chaotic battle, the man hit his head. Meanwhile, Ohol, the protector, was lost in a frenzy, chasing the demi-humans into the forest. Not realizing more were hiding nearby, the surviving soldiers scattered in panic, and the injured man became an easy target. His companion apologized to him, but he didn't mind, saying if their places were switched, he'd do the same. Suddenly, a blade flew out of the shadows, slicing his shoulder, and the demi-human grabbed him by the neck and lifted him off the ground. But the man refused to give up. At the edge of life and death, he finally managed to use the spirit force inside, knocking the demi-human down in just a couple of seconds. But before he could feel happy, he noticed the flames in his hand wouldn't go out, and after a while, his body felt colder and weaker, as if his life force was draining away. It seemed magic used up a huge amount of spirit force. Desperate, he pictured the energy inside him as water pipes and thought about shutting off the valve, but right then, the demi-humans suddenly got up again. He had no time to care, only focusing on putting out the fire, and once he finally did, he was caught again. The demi-humans' faces were burnt and they couldn't see well, and right ahead was a cliff with death on both sides, so the man decided to take someone with him on his trip to the afterlife. He never expected to survive falling off the cliff with the demi-humans, but somehow he was still alive, feeling lucky that he'd chosen to fight to the end, giving him a chance to use the divine stone from the demi-humans to grow stronger. But the wound in his shoulder still wouldn't stop bleeding, and he thought he was doomed after all, until the next day, when he woke up to find his wound healed. Then he noticed that where he'd been chained to a tree, there was a stone wall with strange writing. Wanting to use fire magic to burn away the plants, he accidentally blasted himself backward. When he recovered, he found divine patterns on his own face, just like the protector. He had no idea what this stone wall meant or what being blessed really was. It all seemed too far away to matter. His priority was getting back home. But whenever the divine patterns flashed, he wondered if this really was the blessing's power, since people said only the land god could give blessings, and he couldn't remember ever meeting one. To be safe, he decided to keep it secret. When his friends saw he was all right, they were happy, but wondered why he could work harder than a whole team by himself. He lied and said he'd sneaked a lot of divine stones during the fight, and the others believed him, since they'd heard of people getting much stronger by eating too many stones. That morning, he practiced fire magic again, and noticed he no longer felt that dangerous energy drain like before. Just then, the white-haired daughter of the Lord, who was also secretly practicing, caught him. With no way to hide it, he said he was just trying out the rumored fire-starting skill, and to his surprise, he really succeeded. She said he had the gift of a divine messenger, someone who could really use mysterious. The white-haired one, hearing that someone had become strong after eating many divine stones, realized that person was the main character, so he pulled him along for training. But even as a fellow blessed one, the white-haired had never actually fought before, so even with little effort, the main character was more than a match. It turns out the difference in land gods leads to different levels of strength among blessed ones, so he wanted to train and become stronger, not just for himself, but for reasons he didn't have time to to explain. Since the main character was so curious, the white-haired promised to bring him along to the land god's monthly grave-sweeping ceremony. Their teammates started gossiping that the only reason their team got to be guards was because the white-haired specifically wanted the main character. The main character then learned that the village with the white-haired's land god was now abandoned, the land barren and impossible to farm. The white-haired called the main character to be his guard and walk with him through the village. He was led to a small flower field where the white-haired prayed for blessings to gather there. He explained that with the village abandoned, the land god had weakened, and his own strength was so low that all he could do was keep a small patch of flowers alive, just like how his father's village prospered only because the Lord was strong, always training and eating divine stones to become more powerful. The stronger the Blessed One, the more blessings from the gods and the richer the land, making the land god stronger too. But what surprised the main character was that the land god's tombstone looked familiar. The writing was the same as the one he saw under the cliff, meaning it was also a land god's tombstone. When the main character touched it, he could understand its meaning. But on the other side, the words talked about temples and alliances, but didn't make a full sentence. Now he realized the white-haired's true reason for wanting strength, to someday rebuild this village, since as a blessed one, he had a responsibility to the land. Before long, 8 men attacked from outside, and the guards quickly hid the tomb's entrance, planning to split up, but the white-haired wanted to stay and fight. He was refused for lack of experience, but with 8 men surrounding them, escape was impossible. When he saw the flower field trampled by the 8 men, the white-haired couldn't forgive them and rushed forward, summoning his divine marks to fight, but he trembled so much with nerves that he could hardly move. So at the critical moment, the main character took down the 8-man easily. From then on, the white-haired sought him out for daily sparring, which made a girl who secretly liked the main character feel threatened. One day, she found an excuse to bring him water, and a friend teased her, telling her to seize the chance. But suddenly, a bird's call from the sky matched what he heard when falling into the valley, making the main character want to return there. To his surprise, he could now easily jump over the high wall and move fast as the wind. Feeling the valley calling him, he returned to the land god's tombstone and thanked it for saving his life and giving him the land god's fire. He was amazed that even on a dark night, he could see everything in the valley, which was full of food and water, making him want to settle there. He immediately tried to cut trees to build a house, but his knife couldn't do it, so he had to use magic, almost burning the forest down by mistake. He realized that learning magic came from having a clear idea in his head, then making it real. So he pictured himself chopping wood with his hand, and suddenly strange knowledge about molecules appeared in his mind. He imagined inserting an invisible blade between molecules, and after just a couple of seconds, he heard something approaching. He didn't know that pig-headed men were about to invade the valley. Soon he spotted a group of children by the edge, but on closer look, they were actually the nearby Little People tribe. Their chief knelt down, apologizing for trespassing and begging forgiveness, explaining they were here to fulfill an old promise to the valley's god, treating the main character as a revered deity. He learned the Little People had fled here after being attacked by pigmen and hoped the mediator god would help them. He was surprised to hear this title, but the chief explained the mediator god was a mighty guardian of all things, and seeing the main character's noble blue aura, he believed him to be the valley god's avatar. The chief, with empty eyes, revealed he lost his sight after angering the valley god in his youth, but gained the power to see spiritual light. Seeing the main character's aura, he was sure of his blessing. They had even offered a living sacrifice, as the chief's granddaughter had just been given to the valley. The main character hurried to the valley, finding the severely injured granddaughter, Zimao. Realizing time was short, he imagined healing her cells like he had healed himself. Not sure how it worked, but it succeeded and she recovered. Just then, chaos erupted outside. The pigmen had arrived, and the Little People suffered heavy losses. The main character rushed to help and heard the valley god's voice in his mind, urging him to kill all pigmen and carve fear into their bloodline. Soon, only one pigman was left, begging for mercy, but from the moment they trespassed, their fate was sealed. Seeing no hope, the pigman attacked, but the main character sliced off his arm with his bare hand. The chief, even more convinced, recognized the blue flames around the main character as the same ones the god used when taking the chief's eyes. Once again, the same flames the god had once used to take the chief's eyes. So now, everyone saw the main character as the great and powerful god who balanced the scales of life. Just God who had protected the world since the age of the pig god. The main character was surprised to find the pigmen's blessed one held an enormous divine stone, and according to the Little People's chief, a blessed one could kill another blessed one to absorb their stone and take on the powers of other land gods. Unexpectedly, the main character generously shared some of the divine stone with the chief. When he finished drawing the liquid from the stone, a blue light glowed within him, guiding him as if it were the land god, because when a blessed one dies, the spirit returns to its own grave. But suddenly, the main character's body felt strange, and he had no choice but to return alone, warning all the Little People not to enter the valley. That night, he dreamed of his old village being destroyed, and when he awoke, he found something next to him. It was Zimao, the purple-haired granddaughter of the chief, who had been given to him as a living sacrifice to save her people. Since he had saved her, she insisted on staying by his side no matter what, and even when the main character told her to go back, she refused, so he decided to hurry hurry back to the village at dawn. But as soon as he left the valley, the little people begged to serve the valley god, saying their own home was still lost to the ape men, and now they had nowhere to return. The main character's heart softened, so he let them settle at the edge of the valley as long as they didn't come inside. Finally, he managed to sneak back to the village and meet with the white-haired lord's daughter, who was upset because he was late to training. Unknown to him, his story of saving the white-haired one from the ape men had already spread, and the lord himself requested a sparring match with him. The main character, who only wanted to keep a low profile, was helpless. He had to fight with all his strength, but remembered the chief's warning to hide his blessing and powers, since exposing them too soon could make him a target for other blessed ones. He tried hard not to reveal his divine marks, but facing the lord's power, he almost lost control, and for a moment the marks flickered across his face. He grabbed the lord's huge head, stunning the crowd, but in the end, the lord's monstrous strength sent him flying. Even so, the lord was delighted and decided to train him personally from now on, while the white-haired girl vowed to make their training even tougher, leaving the main character with nothing but despair. That night, he finally slipped out of the village and found Zimao building a house in the valley and preparing a feast for him. Unable to resist, the main character devoured the food, something a common soldier could never dream of eating in the village. So at last, he agreed to let Zimao stay in the valley. By day, he trained with the white-haired girl. By night, he returned to the valley with Zimao. One day, when everyone was clearing new land, they came across a huge rock, and although they thought even the lord couldn't budge it, he smashed it aside with brute force. During all this, the main character tried out his powers, remembering that when the village had been destroyed, he just wanted to save the flowers at least. He recalled escaping his village with Ayersha, who remembered him crying all the way, and on their journey, the group was attacked by ape men. As the ape men closed in on Ayersha, the main character rushed to hug the ape man's leg, holding out until the lord arrived to save them all. To Ayersha, it was the main character who had protected everyone, but unknown to him, a powerful blessed one among the pigmen had now appeared, beheading the ape men's blessed one in a single blow, and was now leading a full-scale invasion of the main character's mountain. Suddenly, royal inspectors arrived at the village, so the lord quickly ordered all food to be handed over before they arrived, but the lord's son, Ohal, not being very bright, thought it was fine to give the guests anything they wanted, not caring that their own villagers would starve. Ohal only wanted to please the officials, but the lord reminded him that someone might die of hunger because of his eagerness to curry favor. Soon after, the inspectors left, their carriage riddled with arrows from local demi-humans. One inspector, a blessed one himself, bragged that he had killed 10 ape men single-handedly, then complimented the white-haired girl's snowy skin, saying she was clearly pampered by the lord, but she denied it. Being a girl meant making up her mind to fight. He laughed, saying she should just marry into a noble family. With the inspector was a monk sent by the great temple. The white-haired girl was furious at the inspector's attitude, while the main character thanked the monk for performing rites at the graves. He warned the monk his clothes were dirty, but the monk had already heard of him, the young man who grew strong by eating many divine stones. The monk too had trained and eaten many stones at the temple, and to the main character's shock, even had divine marks, though he claimed not to be a blessed one. As it turns out, certain training methods and eating divine stones could both lead to divine marks. The monk told them a huge army of ape men had entered the borderlands, larger than ever before, not to invade but for some unknown special purpose. The great temple suspected a hidden goal, so the monk planned to follow them, but because of the local situation, asked the lord for help, who agreed to send the main character's team as guards. This meant the main character couldn't return to the valley for a while. Zimao was sad, feeling he'd never come back, but the main character comforted her, saying that would never happen. After all, as a blessed one, he had a duty to his land. And traveling together with the group was the white-haired girl, and soon they came upon a battlefield where countless ape men and demi-humans were locked in brutal combat. It seemed the monk's pursuit had led to a deadly clash, but the demi-humans were far stronger, and most of the corpses were ape men. The white-haired girl quietly told the main character that she had overheard the monk and her father talking. Both the monk and the demi-humans were looking for something, and the monk had said it was because of a prophecy. The land was said to be about to awaken a powerful god, and both sides wanted to find this god because the god's blessed one would possess unmatched power. To prevent this strength from falling into the hands of the demi-humans, they needed to induct this god into the pantheon of the kingdom first. The main character began to suspect the god everyone was searching for was actually the valley god. These demi-humans were nothing like the ones he had wiped out in the valley before. Soon, they reached a ruined village, once home to the gentle, peace-loving roadrunners who never fought with humans, but now even their legs had been hacked off. The monk wanted to look for clues about the village's god, so they split up to search. The monk was surprised that the main character didn't flinch when he saw fire come from his fingertips, but the main character nervously explained he'd just heard stories. Soon they found the land god's grave marker in the village, behind which lay a roadrunner woman warrior. The white-haired girl also found 3 demi-human corpses, suggesting the main force hadn't attacked the village. Judging by the woman's clothes, she was probably the village lord and a blessed one, just like the white-haired girl, but her wounds clearly came from the demi-human's main advisor. The guards lamented that women were never a match for demi-humans, not knowing the wounds in the advisor's chest perfectly matched those from the Lady Lord, meaning she had killed all 3 attackers herself. Because the Roadrunner's legs were incredibly fast, the Lady Lord had rushed out when the village was attacked, creating a chance for the villagers to escape, which was why no one else in the village had died. Though the guards felt their kind could never compare in strength, the Lady Lord had overcome her fear and weakness, driven by love for her people. This, they realized, was the true strength of a protector. After her burial, the monk noticed no divine stone in her body, meaning her power had already passed to another, but it showed him that the demi-human army had split in 2. One branch came here, the other was headed into the forest, and the god's grave might be hidden deep inside. The main character worried the valley god's secret would be exposed and volunteered to scout ahead. To his shock, he discovered the pig-headed men had already found the valley god. There were many demi-human footprints in the area. Suddenly, a black shadow leaped out from the forest to attack him. He blocked the blow and saw it was one of the little people he'd protected. The little people's chief appeared, explaining that they'd heard the demi-humans were coming for the valley, so they had come first to check things out. The main character wanted to handle it himself, but the little people insisted on protecting the valley too. Since their new village was there, they had become believers in the valley god, and even a tiny bit of power meant they had to help. Soon, the demi-humans appeared, chopping down trees as they marched, and even though there were a lot of them, the main character didn't hesitate. He charged in, only to be spotted by their leader, and a fierce battle broke out. But the ordinary demi-humans were no match for him, and soon the ground was littered with bodies. Their leader stepped forward, and from the divine marks on his face, it was clear he was a blessed one too. The little people's chief recognized those marks as belonging to the 6-headed river, the fiercest of all demi-human protectors, made strong by the land god's power and undefeated in battle, making them the dominant tribe in the north. The main character told the little people to stand back. He knew even holding back, he might die. Unbeknownst to him, the monk used his magic to see things far away, and now realized the main character was the person he'd been looking for. The demi-humans saw the divine marks on the main character's face and knew the previous protector had died, and thanked the little people for driving away their kin. Only then could they find the main character. The little people's chief instantly understood. The leader had tracked them all the way by following the survivors of the main character's last victory. In his mind, the valley god's voice told the main character to kill the blessed enemy before him, but this leader was stronger and better equipped. The main character slid behind him and thrust his spear, but the tip only barely stuck in, then snapped off. Dodging the enemy's huge axe, he kicked the broken spearhead deeper into the wound. The little people had no time to celebrate. The main character didn't give up, bursting out with spiritual power and flames, forcing the leader to fling him aside. It turned out that divine weapons could shield their protectors from magical harm, and those who knew the world's rules could easily guard against such attacks. The main character was trapped, so he tried stabbing with a dagger, but again it broke. The rice balls the girl had made him scattered across the ground, and the monk, watching from afar, knew things were bad. To stop the valley god's power from falling into enemy hands, the monk prepared to intervene. Just then, the main character noticed the rice balls and got an idea. He picked one up while the demi-humans thought he'd given up, thinking about how to break the god's protection. Only by surpassing the world's laws could he win. The enemy couldn't believe it when the invincible one was suddenly beheaded. The demi-humans charged fearlessly, but the main character used his hand to slash, surpassing the world's limits and killed them all, drawing out the divine power before the other demi-humans and unleashing a terrifying aura that made the entire army flee in panic. But as soon as they retreated, the main character collapsed and lost consciousness, and when he woke, he was told the white-haired girl had mysteriously fallen into a coma.